week's What's the Tea? Brought to you by the Press House staff. And this week we have some special guests. What's the Tea is a conversation series about relevant topics in our community. This week, two Press House staff, Becca and myself, Ginger Morgan, are joined by two UW students, Cece Ellis and Esai Ortiz Rivera, as we sit down for 30 unscripted minutes to discuss current events, social and political issues, and more. Not as experts, but as human beings dedicated to dialogue. So in preparation for National Coming Out Day, coming up on October 11th, today's topic is coming out. So before we get started, we want to find out what everybody's drinking.
Do you want to start us off?
I could. I am drinking the end of my morning coffee. So that's not really a good sign at 3 in the afternoon.
Shows us where we're at now.
Yeah, I've got water and also Arnie Palmer, which is kind of tea. It's partially tea.
My favorite kind of tea is an Arnold Palmer.
I actually have nothing, so.
Oh, Esai.
Yeah, I just finished my tea before logging in. So.
Oh, well, Esai is ahead of the game then.
Yeah.
I am double fisting my usual water bottle covered in intersectional stickers and a hibiscus ginger beer, which as a mocktail aficionado, this is very exciting to me. And it has a little bit of a spice kick to it, which I really appreciate. It's very interesting. So, love a good ginger beer. I get to be the quirky one today.
Yeah. So we were talking last week in preparation for this week about October rolling around, and it's an interesting sort of political time to be queer and to think about coming out, and we're all kind of in different sort of places in life and from different backgrounds. And so we were curious, like when we asked and approached you about having a conversation about coming out, what came to mind and what prompted you to want to be in this conversation?
I feel like I just wish that there had been more for me to look at when I was figuring stuff out in like 7th, 8th grade. Because, man, I just took so many BuzzFeed quizzes that are like, are you gay? You know, and I was like, if I take 15 of these, I will figure it out, you know? And it's, you know, it kind of feels like I have the privilege to be able to talk about my experience and also, you know, feel safe doing it. And I have the privilege to connect with other people. And that feels like something I should take advantage of and see if I can do, you know, other baby gays some good.
Well, when it comes to coming out, I'm always interested in participating in conversations like this because this process is not something that's very much scripted. Like it's like this conversation that's happening like right now. It's a process that requires each person to evaluate, you know, their own life and their own position, their own time, and when it's and there's no right answer to like when you should come out or what time is right for you. So I'm always like interested in participating in this to not not only share my story but also reaffirm other people who might not think that this is the right time to come out. So
Yeah, that's super, super real. I think what you said about it's not scripted, and like the more conversation we have about what coming out actually is, I think the more people will feel safe and supported in realizing that that's true and realizing that there's not one way to come out. Like, as some behind the scenes, when Ginger and I were talking about planning this topic, one of the things that came up right away for us was thinking about National Coming Out Day, which is this weekend. And like, I don't know about y'all, like as someone who's been out for many, many years now, it's not really on my radar that much. But it's easy to forget that like every year, there is a whole crop of people, maybe a whole crop of baby gays, as Cece would say, who will be thinking really hard this weekend about making a major shift in their lives and in their relationships and being more honest about themselves. And also the fact that coming out doesn't stop there, that it just keeps going and keeps going every time you meet someone new or you're in a new place or a new space. So those are some of the big like truths that are rattling around in my head around this. And so it's actually, I don't know, I find it interesting to revisit the topic of coming out as someone who just has generally made it the norm to be out in my life for several years. What about you, Ginger?
Well, I definitely feel like the old lady in the crowd in some ways, because I came out decades ago in a really different like cultural moment. So it, it was something you had to do. Like people, there were no, I mean, I suppose there were some of my friends by college probably that thought, oh yeah, she's probably lesbian. But it was before there was conversation about gender identity, really. As there was only presentation and versions of gender, like if a lesbian was butch or femme. It was not so much that there was gender queer or non-binary understandings of how you present yourself and how you embody gender. So it was all really around orientation, which was linked to gender in this kind of confusing way, I think. And definitely the process, like, because the process coming out to my family was a really different thing than coming out. In some ways, the safer set of, I had a set of peers, and I really started my own journey probably about the same time Cece did, but I didn't say anything out loud, really very small in high school and more broadly out loud in college. So, and I still encounter students today for whom, there's this sense of, how do you figure out, like Cece, how do you figure out if you are not whatever the norm, right? The whole heteronormativity. And then, do I have to say something to someone? And why would I? Like, there's more a sense now, like, why do you have to say anything? You just are who you are. And if people get to know you, you'll share what you want to about who you're attracted to or who you're not, or how you present yourself or what pronouns you use. But there was this constant sense that if you didn't disclose, then things were projected on you that didn't fit. You just constantly had to say, no, that's, So it's interesting now, because I feel somewhat like Becca, like National Coming Out Day for me is, in terms of legacy, it's a really important thing in terms of my own life and where I am. There are very few corners left to tell, like to come out to. But this year I walked into a doctor's office with my spouse and my two kids who are teenagers, and the doctor sort of looked at me as the last one in the room and said, "And you are?" And I said, "Also a mom." And she was sort of chagrined and said, "Oh, great." So in that way, she was very welcoming, but there's still those moments where people aren't really sure how to read, like, who are you and why are you in this room with this family? And yeah.
You should get like Dr. Seuss thing 1 and thing 2. You should get mom 1 and mom 2 shirts.
Right. I'm the other mom, right? I like that. That's a
Just for doctor's appointments and school meetings and things like that.
Right. I'm really curious if like coming out to friends and family was different for people in the way that it was different. I mean, it was for me. Just say for me, it was a really different thing.
I mean, for me too, I definitely, like Ginger said, the whole thing of like, why do I have to tell anyone? Let's see. I told my mom almost 4 years ago now because the 2016 election scared me so much. I was like, I gotta get something on my chest. So I told my mom, and that was like a big thing. Like it was a mom, I have something to tell you. It was like a big conversation. But my friends just at some point, some of them started talking about like I had all girlfriends for the most part in high school. Some of them, had started talking about liking this girl or that girl, or we watch a movie and somebody would be like, oh, that girl's, that lady's really hot or whatever. And it just kind of like nobody ever was like, you guys, I think that I might not be straight. We just kind of, because we were all kind of figuring it out at the same time. And I was very fortunate to have accepting friends and friends who, at varying degrees in the past 5 years, all turned out to be queer, which I don't know if any of you guys had a similar experience, but, so among my friends, it was kind of just like, we eventually figured it out. We never like sat down and put everybody in a box, but we got there eventually. And it almost felt, to me personally, whenever I come out to peers, it feels like less of a risk than coming out to my family. Because at least, the way I thought of it when I was in like living with my parents, right, is my parents can, if my parents are very unhappy with this, my life can change drastically. If I have peers who are jerks about it, well, don't we all, like I don't live at their house. So
Right.
it's,
You don't have to,
I
you don't
think
have to
that's,
keep- yeah.
yeah, I think that's probably a big reason that a lot of people have a different like friend and family coming out experience, because you're stuck with your family. I mean, you're not, but especially like if you're, not at college yet, you're stuck with your family. And for better or for worse. And if you take that risk and then they're not welcoming or something, then you can't just be like, oh, time to go find a new mom. Like, I know you've been my mom for a while, but like, this isn't cool. Like, you could do that with a friend, you're like, well, I can see that we're not going to be great about this. We'll, I guess we'll see each other around, but you can't do that with family. And I think that's probably why it's so different.
Mhm.
Well, for me, it was a little bit. So I had to come out 2 times. I came out as a gay man when I was like 13 or 14 to my friends, and that was like a really accepting moment. And then I came out to my mom when I was like 18. Um, but I had to come out as a non-binary person, and um, the experience overall just changed over the years. I would say, like at first, I felt like I needed to tell people because people would just assume things. Um, but that got really that was really that was a thing in high school. When I got to college, it was like a different thing. It was just there was no assumption and no um, no set of behaviors that or performances from my body that would like prompt people to just like make any kind of assumptions. So for me, it was like kind of like a thing that I said it to the people that I thought mattered and needed to be said, and then I stopped talking about it, and I was just and I stopped coming out. I don't come out to anyone anymore. I'm just like if like I and like I want to acknowledge that that's a privilege that me as a male presenting person gets to experience, and because I have a very supportive base composed of my family and my friends who like have my back in case like someone tries to, um, go out of the way with me, or just like the many violent things that can happen to someone when they come out. So like but to me it was just a thing that a shift in the process of like thinking, well, if someone really wants to know about my sexuality, why should I be the person who should be telling them? Like it should be them who would be asking. Like it should be you. If you're curious, just ask me. You know, don't make assumptions. Don't make any, like, don't presume anything just because you think you know me. Just ask me. And basically, now I identify as a non-binary queer person. And whenever I tell people like, well, I don't identify as gay, I identify as queer, and that for me means something today, but that may as well mean something else in the future. So please don't make any assumptions. Just take my word for granted. Right now is at this moment, and if you have any other questions, just ask me 10 years later if I still think the same. So yeah, that's my process, and that's the way I go about things.
I like that. I like that you like stopped telling people at some point, because there does come a point where it's not anybody's business. Like if they want to know, they can ask you. I actually when me and my girlfriend started dating, she had dated men before and she's bi, but I didn't know that right off the bat. I just, I knew that we were dating and she had dated guys before. And I had so many people ask me, like, so is your girlfriend like gay now? Is she bi? And I was like, I don't know. It's none of my business. And they were like, how is that not your business? I'm like, well, it's not my business and it's certainly not your business. You can ask her yourself, It's just, I think it's interesting that a lot of people who maybe haven't had the same experiences of like figuring everything out, because that's a lot harder than I think a lot of cisgender people and straight people understand. I think they're like, oh well, you're gay and you're gay, so that sounds cool. Or they're always like, when did you figure it out? Like, oh yes, October 13th in 2012 I was like, oh, I'm a lesbian. And like there's nothing like that. And
my spouse, when we were dating and I would tell her my coming out story, she's like, how many girls did you kiss and how many years were you doing this before you thought you might be gay? I was like, it was a long time. And a lot of girls kissing, among other things.
Because,
Yes.
nobody knows. It takes a while.
Yeah.
Yes. Looking back, like it's so I also have come out multiple times, and I came out multiple times. Similar to SIE, I came out as a bisexual male first to my friends and my parents, and like Cece was saying, it's really, really different. It makes a big difference what scenario you're in and who has what power over you. Because I was about to head off to college when I came out as bi, and like my friends were all like, okay, great, we support you. My parents, my mother in particular, thought it was just like this huge deal that like, oh, I was like, dropping this bomb on the family. Like, how are we going to deal with this now? And I'm like, we don't need to do anything about it, really. I just wanted to be,
it doesn't take any dealing.
Yeah, I just wanted to be authentic with you. But I think I realized, or I knew deep down in some way, that that first coming out was in some ways a practice for coming out as a trans woman 2 years later, which, like, looking back, I probably could have known if I'd had the language for it, like years and years and years and years earlier. It's that like, wait a minute, why didn't I figure this out? But that very similarly was, I was actually surprised by how not a big deal of any kind it was to my friends, my teachers, my circles at Princeton where I was an undergrad. But again, it was like the end of the world for my parents. And that launched a few years of sort of contentious relationship and trying to figure that out. And I'm no longer in any sort of contact with my parents, unfortunately. But that I was able to come to terms with my own coming out, and now feel like I have full agency over the story, in large part because I am now an independent adult. I came out as trans during college, and then especially once I graduated from college and moved like into my first apartment, was in graduate school, like that makes a huge difference. And so alongside like, well, coming out as a process, it depends who you're coming out to. It's also like, it makes a huge difference actually just where you are, what your living situation is. And unlike coming out just in terms of sexuality, coming out as trans was something where actually suddenly it was everyone's business around me, because I needed them to start referring to me by a different name and different gender pronouns. I needed to like jump through all these legal hoops to change my name on everything from my PayPal account to my social security card to every class roster that I was enrolled in. And so I got used to having it be everyone's business and having to be very forthright and very proactive, because otherwise I was just going to keep getting hit with that old name and those he, him pronouns. And so now it's like really interesting to have sort of emerged into a phase of life where I am, I guess, stealth a lot of the time. I'm still out, like I'm out most of the time in the circles of people who know me, but I have a choice to have it be nobody's business in a way that I did not before, which is almost like, I don't know what to do with this now. Like, I don't know what to do with this freedom.
Yeah.
I think I just, like you said, it's different depending on like where you are in life and where you're living, like you're coming out. I think it's really important that people know that you don't, not only do you not owe that information to anybody, but like if it's not going to be safe for you, then it's better to wait, you know? Like if you're going to get kicked out, you don't owe your parents, you know, it's not, it doesn't have to feel like you're lying to them. It's just, you know, a piece of information that you choose not to share. You can just, you know,
Yeah.
be a girl who's just never really had a boyfriend. That's never really been your thing. You know, like it's, you don't,
I do think
if
you
it's
know,
not safe, then don't.
right.
Yeah.
I do think that sense of not owing people information about you, especially if it's information that'll be used, like, you know, to say, to, you know, I'm not going to pay for your college, or I'm not going to pay, you know, I'm not going to pay to have you live at such and such a place, or whatever, or you're going to get kicked out of the house. Then, you know, certainly protecting your own safety until you're in a position to be more independent and disclose, then, you know, I am. On the other hand, I do think for some people, and even young people, the distress of having people make assumptions or forcing something on them feels so, you know, disconcerting, that it's easier to just say, no, that's not who I am, you know, and you have to just weigh what the different things you're, you know, dealing with, and know that those things over time will shift. So whatever situation you're in right now is not likely to be the situation forever. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just sucks that so many people, so many young people especially, have that impossible choice in front of them, especially at a time when what they need is people supporting them to know how to make the right decision, but instead they have to make it all on their own. Like by the time my parents said to me, "We don't want you at home," I was graduating college and they'd already paid for my tuition, you know? But if that had been 10 years earlier, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah, that's
we
very real.
We're getting short on time, and I'm curious if anyone has any particularly like funny or surprising coming out interactions, because it would be really great to sort of land on some surprises or fun from coming out. So go ahead, Cece.
I came out to my mom and it was like a whole big thing. Like it was, like pull the car over, oh my goodness. But one of the first things she said was, "Huh, I always thought it would be your brother."
Yeah. How does your brother feel about that?
Yeah, and I told him at one point and he was kind of like, "Huh." Ben is a kid of few words. Similar to I came out to my dad and not it was like a couple years later, but I was like, "Hey, my friend Annie, she's actually my girlfriend." And he was like, "Okay." And then he went back to playing Plague Inc. on his phone. He didn't say anything. And I was like, somehow I imagine this being bigger, but I appreciate this. He has not mentioned it since. He does not care. And I appreciate that very much.
I had a similar, though the sort of takeaway comment was different. I was coming out to one of my sisters when I was in college, and sort of all my friends knew, but I was sort of in the process of disclosing to my family. And my family is pretty conservative, especially, and religious. And so I could anticipate the religious objections to my disclosure. And so when I was telling my sister, and with whom I had been pretty close growing up, and she said, "Oh, thank God. I thought you were going to say you weren't Christian anymore." So I thought, well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of mine. I mean, I don't have that many like funny one-liners or anything, but just on the large scale of my life and my coming out, the thing that always surprises people to hear is that the one, like, that I became a Christian after coming out. That was like, people are like, "Wait, you went to college, you came out as trans, and then you came out as Christian." Okay, like,
that doesn't compute for a lot of people.
They're like,
error.
you can't have Jesus and gay. That's illegal.
And that the one branch of my extended family that has really vocally stuck by me is the Methodists, like the one religious branch of my family. So shout out to my awesome, supportive Methodists, and yeah. And my siblings. My siblings are awesome, but
Yeah, I don't have any funny stories. But yeah, I just wanted to mention before time runs out, which I just found out that it has. But like, just wanted to mention to anyone who's listening that if it's not it, to really think about like your coming out process, and not let anyone influence that. It's your time. It's your story. You get to decide when to come out, when to tell other people, when to tell your parents. This is not something that that some people can get to play with. Um, I, for once, had an experience where I came out to some friends, and those um, a person in that circle decided that my coming out story was their story to tell, and so they told other people, and they outed me, and that is not fun for anyone, because like fortunately I was as I said, I was in a very privileged position that my family backed me up and loves me no matter what. But that is not something that other people, like have as like are privileged enough to have. This could mean people being thrown to the streets, or literally being like in this could mean potentially like a dangerous situation and violent situation for many. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Mm-hmm. You own your own narrative. You are the captain of your fate and the master of your soul.
Right. And not just your narrative, you get to live your life.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
on that
think-
Well, with
note,
that, should we?
we are out of time.
We are out of time. We will be back in 2 weeks for another What's the Tea on who knows what topic. We keep it open because the world keeps delivering new stuff to our plate each week. And I think we're all set.
We'll see you
Everyone
then.
can tune in and stay tuned for what our next topic is.